Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of the Hobbit Commander deck techs. I'm releasing a new Hobbit Commander deck every Thursday until October when Reality Fracture drops, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. It's Tolkien, so we're gonna have fun with it. As you see, today our commander is Smaug, Wicked Worm, an enormous red-gold dragon with bat-like wings, a huge tail, and smoke leaking continuously from his nostrils and jaws. Smaug was arrogant and vain, but none of his brags of strength or prowess or invincibility were empty. He was a terror to behold and a force of nature to face. His greatest vice, however, was his greed, which drove him to conquer Erebor, the Lonely Mountain, and to seize the wealth it contained while driving that treasure's dwarven owners into exile. In the events of The Hobbit, Smaug was finally slain by Bard the Bowman and his Black Arrow, freeing Erebor, Dale, and Lake Town at last. Check out the video's description for the Brawl deck I posted for Bard the other day. So much of the DNA of dragons in modern fantasy fiction is owed to Tolkien's depictions of Smaug, and his fearsomeness and avarice can't be understated or underestimated. I'm excited to show you what I put together for Smaug, but before we get started, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a great card, and why I thought it deserved a deck of its own. So I take about 30 cards and put them toward doing whatever my commander asks of me. This is our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into the game plan, sometimes none at all, and I almost always keep to a floor of 38 lands. That way I can always hit my land drops and cast my spells and, play commander. So let's talk about our commander. Smaug Wicked Worm is a 5/5 legendary dragon for 3, a black and a red, that has flying and says when Smaug enters, we make X tapped treasure tokens, where X is the number of artifacts our opponents control. And whenever we cast a spell, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast that spell, we draw a card and we lose a life. Smaug's design is kind of funny to me. It makes sense that he shows up and gives us a pile of treasure the size of our opponent's assets, since he stole from the dwarves of the Lonely Mountain. But his last ability wants us to spend treasure, letting us replace our spells with a new card so long as we use mana from treasures to cast them. It does fit Smaug's story, encouraging us to use our wealth to gain ever more resources while inching us ever closer to our doom, but asking us to sacrifice our treasure in the process rather than, hoarding it, is definitely a compromise of flavor and functionality. In any case, this card is sweet. Treasure is already a fun theme for deck building, and having a card advantage engine in the command zone that rewards us for our treasure uses would be strong even if it weren't stapled to a 5/5 flying body. So the list I've assembled is meant to rely on all those built-in advantages, leaning into Smaug's personality by playing our deck and trusting that our draconic might will carry us to victory on its own. After all, trickery and wisdom and planning and cooperation are virtues of men and dwarves and hobbits, not someone who says this. Girion, Lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are her sons' that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old and strong, strong, strong. Thief in the shadows, my armor is like tenfold shields. My teeth are swords, my claws spears, the shock of my tail a thunderbolt, my wings a hurricane, and my breath death. Remind me again what goeth before a fall? So, if we're playing Smaug, nothing matters more to us than our hoard. We're all in on treasure, giving us a quantity of ramp that Rakdos decks don't usually get to enjoy. We're careful with it, balancing our mana expenditures from land and treasure so that we can maximize the number of extra cards our commander draws us. But many of the spells we cast with those treasures make us more treasure still. Are treasure tokens a good investment vehicle in this economy? My gut says maybe. But if counting our coins is what we do at the table, how do we win? With one of Smaug's best weapons, his fiery breath. We're running a host of burn effects centered on our treasure that let us ping our opponents when our tokens enter the battlefield or leave it. Since we're constantly sacking and stacking treasures to make mana and draw cards, all this burn makes our cash flow quite costly for our opponents. And that feels flavorful. Smaug can wreak havoc from the skies, but by simply playing our deck, our opponents feel his incendiary influence emanating from his mountain home. We don't have to work to be the greatest in the realm, just being a dragon is enough. That said, we can bring the fight to our opponents if we want. Smaug is a big flyer, and we have pump effects to make him or our other creatures even bigger. This deck isn't afraid of combat, even if that's not the main way we win. That's another cool aspect of how it plays. Our repeatable burn effects are our primary source of damage, but our commander appears to be the scariest thing in play thanks to his size and the card advantage he gives us. This forces our opponents to scheme against us. Do they take out our burn pieces and leave us with a big dragon that draws us cards, or do they try to shoot down Smaug himself? Killing our commander won't stop them from dying to direct damage, and even if they do go for Smaug, our treasure production makes him easy to recast, and his enters trigger refills our coffers when he comes back. It's a really exciting kind of resiliency, not just of our threats, but of our game plan itself. As the Raven Roak said, while Thorin and his company searched frantically for the Arkenstone, the treasure is likely to be your death, though the dragon is no more. You'll enjoy this deck if you like the idea of having a surplus of resources in a color combination that's usually too aggressive to cultivate such wealth, or if you want to enjoy the unstoppable power of one of fantasy's greatest dragons and to teach your friends to cower in awe at his magnificence. So, as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will find a considering section filled with cards that I considered putting in the deck, but ultimately which didn't make the cut for me. However, if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you like what I've done here and you want to go more heavily into it, or if you're interested in this as a starting point and you want to get ideas for a different direction to take it in, that considering section is a great place to begin when you build your own Smaug Wicked Worm deck. So, we're going to begin with the section of the deck that Smaug himself would say is the most important, which is our treasure section. Right here. These are all cards that make us treasure in one way or another. So, we're going to start with our Diamond Pickaxe. We'll clear this out. This is a single red for an equipment that equips for 2 and has Indestructible and gives the equipped creature +1/+1, and whenever this creature attacks, make a treasure token. Very simple. Lets us attack, lets us make treasures, we put it on any one of our creatures, and we don't have to worry about the pickaxe itself being destroyed because it's indestructible. That's cool. Compare this as a 1 mana equip for 2 to Goldvein Pick, which is a 2 mana equipment that equips for 1, but doesn't require red. So there you go. It also gives +1/+1, and it makes us a treasure token when the equipped creature deals combat damage. So that's the other difference between the Goldvein Pick and the Diamond Pickaxe. The pickaxe costs 1 and equips for 2. The Goldvein Pick costs 2 and equips for 1, but the pick doesn't make treasure unless the equipped creature does combat damage to a player, whereas the Diamond Pickaxe makes treasure when that creature attacks. So, a little different, but both are good in this deck, so we're running both. Next, we have a really fun one from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms Commander product. This is Bucknard's Ever Full Purse. 2 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 1 and tap it, we roll a 4-sided die and create a number of treasure tokens equal to the result, and then the player to our right gains control of the purse. So the idea behind this is you spend 1 mana and you get a treasure out of it at least, because you can't roll lower than a 1, but you might get up to 4 treasures out of it. So it sort of encourages every player who has this to activate it every turn, and it passes around the table, it just keeps going. The reason this is great is because not only does it mean there's no incentive for someone not to use it, so it gives other players treasures, which means our opponents all have more artifacts in the form of those treasures than they otherwise would, so that when our commander enters, we get more tapped treasures of our own, unless those players want to sack those treasures for no value, which usually doesn't happen. And if someone decides, well, I'm not going to activate it because then you're going to get more, more treasures from my treasures, well, then they've got Bucknard's Everfull Purse on their person, and that's 1 treasure that's going to give us a treasure from Smaug. So yeah, just a fun card that you don't get to see in a lot of decks, so I thought it was a good one in this one. Next, we've got Deadly Dispute, a classic. 1 and a black for an instant, with an additional cost of us sacrificing an artifact or creature, and it says draw 2 cards and make a treasure. So worst case scenario, we might be sacking a treasure and getting a treasure back from it, and we get to draw 2 cards, and we're not down a treasure. And we've had a treasure enter, we've had a treasure leave that triggers some of our burn effects, which we'll see more of later. Just a really great card. And of course, we can also just sack a creature if we want to be up 1 treasure rather than sort of treasure neutral. Next, we have Kalain Reclusive Painter from the Adventures in the Forgotten Realms set. A black and a red for a 1/2 legendary human elf bard, both human and elf because Kalain is a half-elf. That says when Kalain enters, we make a treasure, and other creatures we control enter with an additional 1/1 counter on them for each mana from a treasure spent to cast them. So this is pretty great. It gives us another reason to use treasures to cast spells beyond just what Smaug gives us, because Smaug lets us lose a life and draw a card if we spend mana from any mana from treasures on one of our spells. If that spell was a creature spell and Kalane's in play, each of the treasures we use mana from to cast that creature means a 1/1 counter on that creature when it enters. So yeah, this is a great way for us to have treasures, just the one treasure from Kalane, but also to get more value out of our treasures as we use them on our creature spells, which could, of course, include Smaug himself. Next, we have Marching Duodrone. This is from Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate. This is a terrific set and a very silly creature from D&D that I have had personally a lot of fun with playing, Baldur's Gate drafts and playing this creature. This is a 2/2 artifact creature construct for 2 generic mana that says whenever it attacks, each player makes a treasure. And it's not even a tapped treasure. So this is really great because it doesn't just mean we're going to have a treasure, but it does the Everfull Purse thing of putting additional artifacts on our opponent's boards so that if we attack with the Duodrone, make ourselves a treasure, maybe it's enough, that treasure is enough for us to now cast Smaug, everyone else at the table now has a treasure as well, and so they either are going to throw it away for essentially no value when Smaug enters, or they don't throw it away because they want to use it, and we get an additional treasure from Smaug's enters trigger because of that. It's also not uncommon, at least in my experience, because my friends are fun in Commander, to say, everyone likes the Duodrone, I'm going to attack player A, and then next turn player B, and next turn player C, and just go around the table. Everyone's willing to take 2 damage by not blocking the Duodrone if it means getting an extra treasure token every turn on our turn. So most people will say, of course I won't block the Duodrone, look at this little friend, he's just doing his job and giving us treasures. So generally, that's not going to last forever, but you can usually get people to agree to it because 2 damage for a free treasure, and that 2 damage only happens to you every 3 turn cycles, it's usually a pretty good trade-off. So yeah. Next we have the Sackville Bagginses from the Hobbit set. 1 and a black for a 2/2 legendary halfling citizen that says when it enters, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact, and if you do, draw a card and make a treasure. So it's kind of a little bit of a deadly dispute, even though it's only 1 card. And whenever you sacrifice a token, target opponent loses 1 life. That's any token. So if we were to sacrifice a treasure, simply by spending it, we burn an opponent for 1. But if we sack a creature token or some other artifact token when the Sackville Bagginses enters, that's also going to trigger this. So yeah, if we're cracking any clues or any food tokens, of which we have at least 1 way to make those things, we're going to get to drain an opponent for 1. And that seems pretty good. Next we have Gadrek the Crown Scourge. This is 2 and a red for a 5/4 flying legendary dragon that can't attack unless we have 4 or more artifacts. But Gadrek can still block, and a 5/4 blocker in the air is pretty solid. And at the beginning of our end step, we make a treasure token for each non-token creature that died this turn. So it encourages us to send some of our removal spells at our opponent's creatures to attack in, especially if we're going to be able to trade or have an advantageous attack. We just want our opponent's stuff to die so we get more treasures, and the more treasures we have, the more artifacts we control, and eventually Gadrek can attack. We don't usually have to worry about using Gadrek's end step ability or end step trigger to get enough artifacts in order for Gadrek to attack. This deck makes so many treasures and has plenty of artifact spells in it that, again, we're not usually that worried about it. But nice to be able to have a 5/4 flyer for 3, even if it can't attack maybe initially. Next up is a card that I really love from the New Capenna, from the Streets of New Capenna set, and works so well in this deck. It's Glittering Stockpile. This is 2 and a red for an artifact treasure. It has the treasure subtype. And if we tap it, we get to make a red mana and put a stash counter on the stockpile. Stash counters don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, it's just used by this card. And then we can tap it and sack it to add an amount of mana of any one color equal to the number of stash counters on it. So essentially, we build up stash counters on this thing by tapping it for red, and eventually we can crack it for a lot of mana of any one color, which could be black in this deck if we need it to be. So this is good in a number of ways. It's essentially a manalith for us, even though it only makes red and not red or black, in that it's a 3 mana artifact that taps for mana. It is also a treasure, so we can crack it for a lot of mana later on and use that mana as mana from a treasure source because this has the treasure type. But even more importantly, we just tap this for red, and this red mana is from a treasure source. So Glittering Stockpile exists in play to be a treasure we can repeatedly use. We don't have to sacrifice it in order to get its value. Now, we get value in a number of ways from having our artifacts go to the graveyard, or our tokens be sacrificed, or just our artifacts be sacrificed, but Glittering Stockpile is able to give us value from our commander and from other cards like Kalane without us having to lose it. So that's pretty sweet, being able to repeatedly get Smaug's trigger just by casting spells using the mana from Glittering Stockpile. So yeah, pretty good. Next is Glowin Dwarf Emissary from the Lord of the Rings set. 2 and a red for a 3/3 legendary dwarf advisor that says whenever you cast a historic spell, make a treasure, but only once each turn. Historic spells are anything that's an artifact, anything that's legendary, or any sagas. We don't have any sagas in this deck, but we have quite a few artifact spells, like 22 of them, and we've got plenty of legends, as you can see. Glowin, Locke, Smaug himself, of course. In fact, how many of our spells in this deck are historic? Looks like 32. So that means 31 of our spells, since Glowin won't trigger off of himself, will make us a treasure, just as long as we do it, once every turn. So yeah. Oh, I guess I should read the rest of the card. We can also tap and sack a treasure, tap Glowin and sacrifice a treasure, to goad a target creature. Goading, of course, means that creature is forced to attack until our next turn, if able, and if able, has to attack a player other than us, which isn't just a protection effect for us, it also forces them to not attack like a planeswalker or a battle. It has to go at a player other than us if it's able to. So a pretty nice way for us to protect ourselves from the biggest, scariest creature on the battlefield that at least we don't control, because it's going to be going at someone else. And if it doesn't have vigilance, then that means it's also tapped and therefore unable to block next turn. Pretty good. Next, we have Locke Treasure Hunter from the Final Fantasy Commander decks. This is 1 black and a red for a 2/3 legendary human rogue that can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, which generally means Locke is not going to die if we attack with him. Assuming we don't have or our opponent doesn't have a death touch blocker, then Locke can't be blocked by something with greater power, and therefore something that could kill it. So Locke is either going to get blocked by something small and maybe kill that thing, or Locke's just not going to get blocked. And Locke has the Mug ability. Whenever Locke attacks, each player mills a card, and if a land card was milled this way, we make a treasure, and until end of turn, we can cast a spell from among those cards. So this is a really powerful ability. This is actually a card that would be pretty cool as a commander itself, because Locke is protected, for the reasons I just said, whenever we attack with it, so we want to attack with Locke, and when we do, everyone mills, so that's 4 cards getting milled, assuming we have 3 opponents. If anyone mills a land, we get a treasure, but remember, it's not 1 treasure per land milled, it's just if any lands were milled, we get a treasure, and then anything that wasn't a land, we can cast, and we can use treasure, including the one that Locke just made us, to cast those spells if they happen to be colors that we can't make with our lands. So this is a really nice way for us to steal things from our opponents, another thematic choice for Smaug, but also simply just to make a treasure and to get things off the top of our opponents' libraries and our own. Because remember, this includes us milling a card, so we're essentially impulse drawing a card, even though it's not going into exile and we're casting it from there. It's going to our graveyard, but we can cast it from there. And if it was a land, obviously it's just gone, but we got a treasure. So yeah, this is kind of drawing us a card, it's giving us treasure, it's letting us steal from our opponents. Lots of cool stuff going on here. Next, we have Seize the Spoils. Great card. And even though this was reprinted recently at time of recording in Secrets of Strixhaven, and it's been reprinted in Foundations, I almost always try to use the Jesper Agesing art, whose name I can never pronounce. But I love his art, and I love Call Time, and I love this. So yeah, this is 2 and a red for a sorcery that says as an additional cost, discard a card, then draw 2 cards and make a treasure. So this is kind of the same as Deadly Dispute, but it costs 1 more mana, and instead of sacking something, you're discarding a card. But then it gives you 2 cards and a treasure. Of course, it's a sorcery. Yeah, so it's maybe not quite as similar as I say. But this is one of the several cards we have in this deck that does this kind of thing. It does Tormenting Voice plus treasure. Tormenting Voice is a sorcery for 1 and a red that has you discard a card as an additional cost, and then you draw 2. Seize the Spoils is the same as that, except that it costs 1 more, but gives you a treasure for that 1 more. So a pretty nice effect here for 3 mana. I'm going to jump ahead and talk about the 3 variations we have on this at 4 mana. We're going to start with the original, which is Pirate's Pillage. Pirate's Pillage is exactly the same thing as Seize the Spoils, except it costs 1 more and makes an extra treasure. 3 and a red, sorcery, additional cost to discard a card, draw 2, make 2 treasures. Awesome. It's just Tormenting Voice for 2 more mana, but it gives you 2 treasures in the process, so it fixes your mana and banks that mana for you. This is great. But what if you wanted to do this at instant speed? Well, we have Unexpected Windfall for that. Oop, gotta go down for Unexpected Windfall. Unexpected Windfall came next, in that it is exactly the same as Pirate's Pillage, except that it's an instant and requires an extra red mana, so it's 2 and double red rather than 3 and a single red. But otherwise, it requires us to discard a card, draws us 2, and makes us 2 treasures. So that's the upgrade, quote unquote, from Pirate's Pillage, but the bigger upgrade is Big Score. Big Score from Streets of New Capenna is just Pirate's Pillage, but at instant speed. 3 and a red, extra cost to discard a card, draw 2, and make 2 treasures. So I say all this together because we've got Seize the Spoils, Big Score, Pirate's Pillage, and Unexpected Windfall that are all essentially doing the same thing for us. Seize the Spoils makes 1 fewer treasures but costs 1 less mana. 2 of these spells are sorceries, 2 are instants, but they're all making treasure for us, putting cards in our graveyard to give us card advantage. If you want to think of it as card advantage, which I think it counts as it, because whatever you're discarding might be something you couldn't have used or couldn't have used as quickly. So yeah, I like these effects, and so we're running basically all of them. Next we have Shiny Impetus. 2 and a red for an aura that enchants a creature and gives that creature +2/+2 and goads it. It's not goaded until our next turn, it's goaded as long as Shiny Impetus is attached to it. So this is a thing we can put on one of our creatures if we want, including our commander, making our commander into a 7/7, but forcing our commander to have to attack every turn. Or we can use this effect the same way we did with Glowin and put it on an opponent's creature, hopefully an opponent's creature that we think is not going to die when it attacks, especially since it's got +2/+2 now, in order to force it to attack and attack someone other than us. So it's sort of a protective effect in the sense that it's also kind of a removal effect. It doesn't really get rid of that creature, but it does get rid of us having to worry about it. But we can also use it on one of our own creatures, including Smaug, and it works for us either way. No matter whose creature it is, though, whenever that creature attacks, we make a treasure token. So we have a similar trigger to our Diamond Pickaxe. That's an attack trigger, makes us a treasure, but it works on anyone's creature, and whatever creature is enchanted by the Shiny Impetus. So repeatable treasures, and hopefully protection from a creature or a nice pump effect on one of our creatures. Next, we've got Skullport Merchant from originally Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, but it was reprinted in Baldur's Gate. 2 and a black for a 1/4 dwarf citizen that when it enters makes us a treasure, and then we can pay 1 and a black and sack a creature or a treasure to draw a card. So not quite the same as, Deadly Dispute, but kind of along the same lines. Lets us have an outlet for our treasures that lets us turn our treasures into cards if we need to. If we don't want to simply use that treasure to cast a spell and thereby draw a card off of our commander's trigger. Maybe our commander's not in play, or maybe we are down to a bunch of treasures and untapped mana, but we don't have any cards in hand. Well, we can't draw a card by casting a spell if we don't have any spells to cast, so Skullport Merchant gives us the ability to do so. Pretty good. Next, we have Swashbuckler Extraordinaire, another card that lets us have additional uses for our treasures. 2 and a red for a 2/2 Dragon Rogue Warrior that says when it enters, we make a treasure. Pretty good. And when we attack, we may sacrifice any number of treasures, and when we do, we can make that same number of target creatures gain double strike until end of turn. A lot of the times in this deck, this just says when we attack with Smaug, we can sack a treasure to give Smaug double strike. That's a pretty solid way to do some bad beats for our opponent. But if we have other creatures we want to attack with, that seems good too. So yeah, the Swashbuckler gives us a refund, so it's kind of a 2-mana 2/2, and then gives us the ability to use our treasures to do some damage. Notably, it does say sacrifice one or more treasures, as does Skullport Merchant. We can sack a creature or a treasure. That could be the Glittering Stockpile. It doesn't have to be a token for either of these two. We've seen Vixcore. Let's talk about Coin of Mastery from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Commander set. This is 4 generic mana for an artifact that says each creature we control enters with an extra 1/1 counter on it for each mana from an artifact source spent to cast it. So we've got a little bit of a Kalane situation going on here as well, kind of the same effect. And we can tap the coin to make a treasure. So in a way, this is a mana rock. It's 4 mana rather than 3 for what a manalith would be. But what it does is it makes us a treasure that we can immediately crack for mana. So we tap this and then crack the treasure to make a mana. It's an extra step, but it is like a 4-mana mana rock that gives us Kalane's effect on all of our creatures. And if we don't need its mana during one particular turn cycle, we can still tap it and get the treasure and just bank that treasure for ourselves. Pretty good. Next is Decadent Dragon. This is 2 and double red for a 4/4 dragon with flying and trample that says when it attacks, we make a treasure. So another Diamond Pickaxe attack trigger that makes us a treasure. Pretty solid for a really beautiful Wiley Beckett art dragon. But it also has an adventure. If you've never seen adventures before, the way this works is this. When the Decadent Dragon is in your hand, you can just cast it, and then you just ignore the adventure. You get a 4-mana 4/4 flying trampling dragon that makes treasures. Or you could send it on an adventure first, meaning you cast the Expensive Taste instant for 2 and a black, which exiles the top 2 cards of target opponent's library face down, and then we can look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. Another nice way for us to steal things using a dragon, Smaug flavor, but also to mess up someone's draw if they have maybe brainstormed or scryed or surveilled something to the top. You know, we use this at instant speed to take the thing that they wanted. That's pretty good. And the idea with an adventure is, if you cast an adventure, the card then goes to exile rather than the graveyard once this resolves, and then we are allowed to cast the creature half of it, the dragon, from exile as long as it's exiled. We don't even have to wait until another turn if we've got the mana to cast it right away. So either you get to cast the adventure and then the dragon, or you get to cast just the dragon. You cannot cast the adventure once the dragon's in play without doing something like bouncing the dragon back to your hand so that you can cast the adventure from your hand. So yeah, 2 cards in 1. Don't have to cast the adventure. The dragon's pretty good on its own, but either way, we've got some flavor here. Next up is Pitiless Plunderer, because we've already seen Pirate's Pillage. This is 3 and a black for a 1/4 human pirate that says whenever another creature we control dies, make a treasure. So this is not a deck where we're trying to have our stuff die a lot, but we might as well have the ability to make treasure and be rewarded for our creatures dying, especially if we have a few ways to sacrifice our creatures. Pretty good. Prosper Tomebound is next. This is a great card and a wonderful commander. 2 and a black and a red. 2 a black and a red, I should say, for a 1/4 legendary Tiefling Warlock with Death Touch that has the Mystic Arcanum ability. At the beginning of our end step, we exile the top card of our library, and until the end of our next turn, we can play that card. So essentially, at our end step, we're drawing a card. It's face up. You know, it's an exile. Not everyone, everyone gets to see it, but no one can make us discard it or anything since it's not in our hand. And we can play it on our next turn, or if it's an instant, before our next turn if we feel like it. So we're essentially getting a free card every turn. We just sort of quote-unquote draw it on the previous turn's end step. And Pact Boon. Whenever we play a card from exile, we make a treasure token. Notably, it says play a card from exile. So that's not just spells, it's lands as well. So if we exile a land with Prosper, we can play that land as our land drop on our next turn, get a treasure as well, and that's pretty good. But that's whenever you play a card from exile. We also have things like Decadent Dragon's Adventure, Expensive Taste, which exiles the top 2 cards of an opponent's library, and we can look at and play them, which includes lands, as long as they remain exiled. When we do that, we are playing a card from exile, and Prosper will trigger and give us a treasure. Pretty sweet. So card advantage, treasure production, yeah, like it. Next, we have a Nuka Penna Commander card. This is 3 and a red for a 4/3 Ogre Warrior called Rose Room Treasurer. It has an Alliance ability. Whenever another creature we control enters, we create a treasure token if this is the first or second time this ability is resolved this turn. So every time we have a creature come in, if it's our first or second creature that's entered, other than the Rose Room Treasurer, we get a treasure. And if it's our third or later time, if we have 3 or more creatures come in, each of those times, the third and fourth and so forth times creatures come in, we can pay any amount of mana and do that much damage to any target. So we can burn an opponent, we can send damage at an opponent's planeswalker or one of their creatures and kill the creature. Yeah, usually the treasurer in this deck is just making us treasure. But being able to use that treasure or any of our lands to cast spells and then pump it into the treasurer's triggered ability if it's the third or more times that it's resolved this turn, and turn it into damage can really be painful for people. We've seen Unexpected Windfall. Next we have Visions of Ruin. 3 and a red for a sorcery that says each opponent sacrifices an artifact, and for each artifact sacrificed this way, you create a treasure token. So this is a solid way to remove people's mana rocks, at the very least. Or maybe someone's got a Solemn Simulacrum that they're excited to sacrifice because it lets them draw a card, but we get a treasure, and those treasures we get for each of these that are being sacrificed aren't tapped. This is also a cool thing for us to use because we have a few ways, as you've seen, to give treasures to our opponents, and then the idea behind that is we play our commander, Smaug comes in, and we get tapped treasure tokens based on the number of artifacts our opponents have, but they could respond to that, to our casting of Smaug or to his interest trigger by cracking those treasures so that they deny us the treasures that we could get from Smaug. Visions of Ruin is sort of a way to punish them for that, because maybe they have a bunch of treasures, whether we gave them to them or not, and they sack them just to deny us treasures when we cast Smaug. Then we cast Visions of Ruin, and they don't have any artifact tokens anymore. They only have, if they have any artifacts, they only have artifacts that they had to spend mana to cast, assuming these aren't like Ornithopters. So we're taking away cards from them, like actual cards, not tokens, since that's all they've got left, with Visions of Ruin. Pretty good. And it refills our treasures in the process. 4 mana to probably get 3 treasures and deny each opponent an artifact is not a terrible rate. And Visions of Ruin has flashback for 8 and double red, so that's 10 mana, but it costs generic mana amount less to cast, equal to the greatest mana value of a commander we own on the battlefield or in the command zone. So Smaug costs 5, so we can flash this back for a total of 5. 8 minus 5 is 3, and double red. Pretty good. Next up, we have a great one from Kaldheim originally. This is our Goldspan Dragon. It's 3 and double red for a 4/4 dragon with flying and haste that says whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, we make a treasure token, and all of our treasures have an additional ability that lets us tap and sack them to add 2 mana of any one color. So our treasures can be sacrificed for double mana as long as the Goldspan Dragon's in play. And it's going to give us treasures as the same turn it comes in, probably, because either it's going to come in and we can attack with it with haste, so it attacks and makes us a treasure, or it's going to come in and an opponent's going to try and remove it, which means it's probably the target of a spell, so we'll get a treasure as well. We won't be able to, if they remove it, we'll get that treasure and it won't tap for double unless we crack it, I guess, before the removal spell resolves. But yeah, Goldspan Dragon is a pretty nice way to have an extra nice dragon in the air, doing 4 damage, making us treasures, making our treasures make double mana. Seems good. Next is Inspired Tinkering. 4 and a red for a sorcery that exiles the top 3 cards of our library and says until the end of our next turn, we can play those cards. Again, it's play, so we can play lands from that as our land drop. It's until the end of our next turn, so we can do it this turn, do it next turn, whatever we need. And this will also trigger Prosper for us when we play these cards. In addition, it just makes us 3 treasure tokens. So in a way, if you think of it as this is a 3 mana rebate, we're sort of paying 2 mana to draw 3 cards, which is a pretty great rate. Obviously we have to front 5 mana for it, but we can use these treasures for more than just banking our mana, especially in this deck. So this is a great card for us. Next is one that I love, and I'm excited to talk about in this deck because it's so cool. Rankle and Torbrand, which, if you're interested in this card as I explain it, take a look at the video's description, and you'll be able to see the Rankle and Torbrand deck I'm built. last year, I think it was. It might have been earlier this year, because I built a commander deck for every single creature in March of the Machine, which is where this is from. So yeah, I recommend you check it out, because this is a great card. It's 1 double red and double black for a 3/4 legendary fairy dwarf, a fairy and a dwarf, with flying, first strike, and haste, that says whenever Rankle and Torbrand deal combat damage to a player or a battle, I guess we don't have any battles in this deck, but I mean, maybe someone else has got a battle and we maybe want to make a deal with them to attack their battle to help them out. Could happen. Whenever it does combat damage to a player or a battle, we get to choose any of these 3. Each player makes a treasure, each player sacks a creature, or if a source would deal damage to a player or battle this turn, it deals that much damage +2 instead. So let's talk about this last one first. Obviously, it doesn't apply to Rankle and Torbrand's own damage because it only happens once they've done combat damage. However, Rankle and Torbrand, like one of the old Drana cards, has first strike. So the idea here is, let's say we attack with Rankle and Torbrand and Smaug. Rankle and Torbrand are going to do damage first, thanks to first strike. And so they're going to do 3 to our opponent. We choose this effect, and now Smaug does damage. Smaug is doing damage to a player or battle, we assume, and is now doing 2 extra damage. So that's 5 goes to 7. So we've done 10 damage where we would have done 8. 8 damage is already a lot, but 10 is better. It also says if a source would deal damage to a player or battle this turn, we have a lot of burn in this deck. So we could play Rankle and Torbrand, attack with it and Smaug, do our 10 damage, 3 for Rankle and Torbrand, 5 plus 2 for Smaug, for a total of 7, for a grand total of 10. And then, later in that turn, if we have anything that cares about us making treasures, that cares about us sacrificing our treasures to do burn damage, all of that burn damage, as long as it says deals damage rather than player loses life, that damage that's dealt is going to have 2 added to it for every instance of it. So this can be an awful lot of damage for us in the way that the original Torbrand card sort of always did. So that's pretty great. However, it also can let us make a treasure and sack a creature. So this does cost us a creature as well, but that's okay with us because it's costing all of our opponent's creatures. It can give our opponent's treasures, but we want that if Smaug's not in play, so that we can then play Smaug after Rankle and Torbrand has attacked and done its combat damage, so that Smaug comes in and our opponents have that same choice. Do they crack these treasures for no value, assuming they don't have instant speed things, or do they let them stay in play, knowing we're going to get even more treasures from our Smaug's enter trigger? Plus we get a treasure for it, which is what we want to do anyway. But even better, think about us having, let's say a Reckless Fireweaver trigger. Reckless Fireweaver is a 2-mana 1/3 that when an artifact enters under our control, it deals a point of damage to a player. If that's in play, and we have Rankle and Torbrand do combat damage to a player, we can choose their first ability and their last ability, and they both resolve before anything else goes on the stack, which means we're going to make a treasure, which will trigger our Reckless Fireweaver, but it will only trigger the Fireweaver after this is already resolved. So when the Fireweaver's single ping of damage from that treasure entering resolves, it's going to have 2 added to it. So it becomes a lightning bolt when it was just a single point of damage. So Rankle and Torbrand works great in this deck, in addition to being another flyer with a solid ability to block, but we're not blocking with Rankle and Torbrand, we're attacking with haste and first strike. So yeah, pretty fun. Next we have Blood Money. This is our 1 Wrath of the deck. 5 and double black for a sorcery that destroys all creatures, and for each non-token creature we destroy this way, we make a tapped treasure token. So a whole lot of treasures to clear the board and get things started again, which is especially nice because it's probably late game since we're casting a 7-mana spell, or, I guess it could be mid-game, but probably late game. If this kills Smaug, well, that's all right. We get to recast Smaug and get Smaug's enters trigger again. And our opponents probably have more than just a couple of artifacts in play, with their soul rings and their arcane signets and whatever else. So yeah, Blood Money is a sweet wrath for us. Next we have Brass's Bounty, another 7-mana spell. This is 6 and a red for a sorcery that says for each land you control, make a treasure token. So in this deck, it's possible that this only makes us, 4 treasures. But generally, we're only casting this if we've got at least 7 lands. 7 to cast it. So this essentially lets us turn all our lands that are in play into, we convert the mana from those lands into treasures, so we can either hang on to that or use it later on. If we spend 1 treasure on Brass's Bounty and 6 mana from lands while Smaug is out, then we are making 6 treasures, and we're also drawing a card and losing a life off of Smaug, so we're placing Brass's Bounty in our hand, and we're setting ourselves up for the next couple of turns at least. Pretty good. Finally, in this section is Hit the Motherlode. It's sort of Brass's Bounty for the Lost Caverns of Ixalan. It's 4 and triple red for a sorcery that has us discover 10. Discover means we exile cards from the top of our library until we find a non-land that has mana value 10 or less. We can either cast that card for free without paying its mana cost, or we can put it in our hand, and then everything else that we exiled we put on the bottom in a random order. So generally this means cascade into any spell, because we don't have any spells that cost 10. And then anything we had to cascade through, which is to say any lands we found, we put on the bottom in a random order. So yeah, we just find the first non-land in our deck, and either we can put it in our hand or we can cast it for free. And whether we cast it or not, we make a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to the difference between 10 and its mana value. So if we find a 4-drop, we're going to make 6 tapped treasure tokens whether or not we cast that spell. And we're probably going to cast the spell, because why wouldn't we? So yeah, Hit the Motherlode is a great way for us to guaranteed make treasures, especially in this deck, but also give us a free card, which is to say it's free in the sense that it only costs 7 mana. So yeah, and that covers all of our treasure section and therefore our game plan. Oh hey, did you just like the video? Nice, I appreciate that, thank you. I'm just kidding. I do appreciate it, but you don't have to like the video just because I asked you to. Thank you for being here either way. I appreciate you joining me. Anyway, let's keep moving. We are going to go now to our sections of support for our game plan. We're going to start with our card advantage section, which as usual I have just tagged as draw. It doesn't mean that all these cards do the draw a card action. It just means that they give us access to more cards. So Deadly Dispute will draw us 2 cards when we cast it. Idol of Oblivion is a 2-mana artifact that if we tap it, we can draw a card. Just tap to draw a card. The only restriction is we can only use that on a turn that we've created a token, which is a lot in this deck. We're making a lot of treasure tokens. It doesn't require a creature token to have come in. So we can, every turn we make a treasure, also tap the Idol of Oblivion and draw a card. So this adds to, it's not in this deck that we're drawing a card every turn with Idol of Oblivion, but some games we are, and so if we're using those treasures also to cast spells while our commander's in play, that's an extra card on top of what we're getting from our commander, on top of what we're drawing for the turn. So 3 free cards a turn seems pretty good to me. Free, quote unquote. Idol of Oblivion can also be sacrificed itself if we pay 8 to tap and sack it to make a 10/10 colorless Eldrazi creature token. Not usually something we're doing in this deck. We usually just want to use this to draw ourselves cards every turn. But if we need a big beater, it's not hard for us to get this much mana and at instant speed surprise our opponents with a big Eldrazi. Next we have Mind Stone. This is really more of a mana rock. It's 2 generic mana for an artifact that we can tap for colorless mana. But if we want, we can cash it in. We can pay 1, tap and sack it to draw a card. So something we would normally only do if we're just desperate for card draw, which is not really a problem in this deck, or if it's late game and we just don't need the mana anymore, we can spend 1 mana to crack this, draw ourselves a card, and keep going. Good either way. We've seen the Sackville Bagginses. They let us draw a card and make a treasure if, when they enter, we sack a creature or artifact. Next we have Academy Manufacturer, one of the more expensive cards in our deck. This is 3 generic mana for a 1/3 artifact creature assembly worker that says if you would create a clue, food, or treasure token, instead create 1 of each. So we're mostly, in this deck, just making treasures. So Academy Manufacturer says every time you make a treasure, also get a food and a clue. If you don't know what these are, food are artifact tokens that if we pay 2, tap and sack them, we gain 3 life. And clue tokens don't even require us to tap them. We just pay 2 and sacrifice them to draw a card. So Academy Manufacturer makes us clues every time we would make treasure, so we're getting card draw on layaway, essentially, and those food aren't anything to sneeze at either. It especially does something great for us in that it gives us 3 different trinket tokens that we can have enter or leave the battlefield either by sacrificing them or sacrificing them to their own abilities, that is, or to something like the Sackville Bagginses, in order to trigger all of our cards that care about artifacts entering or artifacts leaving the battlefield, tokens leaving the battlefield, whatever it may be. So the Academy Manufactor really helps us in this deck enhance what we're already doing. Even though it doesn't give us more treasures, it sure does give us other good stuff that we can use, particularly those clues that let us draw cards. Next, we have Lock. We've already seen Lock. Lets us have access to cards because Lock will attack, everyone mills, and we can cast a spell from among the cards that were milled, which could be one of ours or someone else's. Next, we have My Precious. Not really that related to Smaug, but it's from The Hobbit, and it's a cool card and really, really beautiful art. This is a legendary equipment that has an adventure. So its adventure is the Allure of Power, 1 and a black for an instant speed adventure that says as an additional cost, sack a creature, it has to be a creature, and then draw 2 cards. So we can turn one of our creatures into 2 more cards, seems good. And the My Precious equipment is 3 generic mana for an equipment that equips for the cost of 2 generic and 2 life, but it gives that creature hexproof and unblockable. So pretty nice for us. This is a more expensive, but more a lot more powerful sort of, I guess if you want to think of it as like a Swiftfoot Boots, because it's an equipment that grants hexproof. It doesn't grant haste, but it does make a creature unblockable. So hexproof and unblockable is pretty nice when we have a huge commander like ours, and paying 2 mana and 2 life to equip it, it's not that much of an ask. And having this extra effect is pretty good for us as well, because remember, having the value of an adventure is already good. It's already a split card we essentially get to have both effects of. But it also means that with Smaug out, if we spend mana to cast Allure of Power, then we're going to lose a life and draw a card off of Smaug. If we use treasure mana to cast it. And if we then use treasure mana to cast My Precious, we're getting to do that again. So it's 1 card, but it's 2 spells, so it's 2 different instances of Smaug's triggers if we're using treasure on each one. So we get 2 extra cards. So there's extra value to be eked out if we're willing to sort of aggressively use our treasure mana to do so. Pretty good. We've seen Seize the Spoils. It will draw us 2 cards. Skullport Merchant lets us sack a creature or a treasure to draw a card. Big Score, Pirate's Pillage, and Unexpected Windfall all draw us 2 cards in addition to the other things they do. Decadent Dragon's Expensive Taste Adventure exiles the top 2 cards of an opponent's library, and we can look at it and play them as long as they're exiled, so that's card advantage. Prosper exiles a card at the start of our end step that we can cast or play until the end of our next turn. Inspire Tinkering does that same kind of exile until the end of our next turn effect for 3 cards off the top of our library, and Hit the Mother Lode discovers 10, which means it finds us the first non-land in our deck and gives it to us in addition to a bunch of tapped treasure tokens. Cool. That is our card advantage section. Next up is Acceleration, which is tagged here as Ramp, as usual. Now, I know you're looking at this and you're saying, wait, that says 8. You're supposed to have at least 10 in every section. I agree, but sometimes you make an exception, and the reason for that is we just went over a section of cards that makes treasure. There's 30 cards that are or make treasure somehow in this deck, and treasure is acceleration. So we don't need that much in the way of typical acceleration, and as you can see, Glittering Stockpile's in this section as well because it's not a treasure token. It's, even though we can crack it with its second ability and make that temporary mana the way that treasures do, we can also just use it as a mana rock. So yeah. We're going to start with our Soul Ring here though. This is a single generic mana for an artifact that taps for 2 colorless, and that's all it does, and that's all it needs to do because it's extremely powerful. Great in this deck, especially with a 5 mana commander. We want to be able to run this in as many decks as we can, so yeah, put it in your deck. Wayfarer's Bauble is next. We're not in green, so this is our Rampant Growth. It's 1 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap, and sack it, we get to search our library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. That is Rampant Growth. So this is great. I love having Wayfarer's Bauble in my opening hand on a deck like this because we play an untapped land, play the Bauble. Turn 2, play an untapped land, crack the Bauble, and now we're going into turn 3 and we've already got 3 mana in play, at least one of which is making whatever color we most need because that's what we found with Wayfarer's Bauble. Great. Remember also, this is a card that in all of these, except for Rivaz, are artifacts that will enter the battlefield, two of which, or three I guess I should say, Wayfarer's Bauble, Mind Stone, and Glittering Stockpile, are all cards that can be sacrificed, which means they leave the battlefield, and that will trigger any of our cards that care about that happening too. So Wayfarer's Bauble gives us extra value with our burn effects beyond just Rampant Growthiness. We also have Arcane Signet, 2 generic for an artifact that taps to add 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So in this deck, a black or a red. An untapped 2 mana rock that makes both of our colors. Of course we're going to run this. We've got Mind Stone. It's another 2 mana untapped rock, but it makes colorless, but we can also crack it for a card. We've got a Rakdos Signet, which is another 2 mana untapped rock, but it requires us to pay a mana into it in order to tap it for mana. But when we do, it makes a black and a red, so we get 2 mana. So we're tapping 2 mana sources, whatever we're tapping for this cost and the Signet itself, to get 2 mana. So it's pretty nice. It can't tap for mana on its own, but as long as we've got at least 1 mana up, we are able to fix our colors however we need to. Next is Talisman of Indulgence. This is 2 generic for an artifact that taps for colorless, or it taps for black or red if we're willing to let it do a damage to us in the process. And what I like to say is, we always are. Because the way you want to think of it is this. If you were going to cast a spell and you don't need colored mana to do so, you just spend colorless mana from the Talisman of Indulgence. But if you do need colored mana, what does it mean to need colored mana? It means that being able to tap this for colored mana is the difference between you casting a spell or not. So the way to look at this second ability is, would you pay a life to cast 1 more spell on a turn than you otherwise would be able to? I would, because 1 life in a 40 life format is nothing compared to being able to cast more spells, maybe multiple spells per turn with this mana. And I know that every point of damage this does to me puts me closer to death, but it also puts me closer to winning, because it's every time I use it, I'm casting a spell I otherwise wouldn't have been able to cast. So that's more spells per game, so more progress toward winning with my game plan. So yeah, Talisman of Indulgence, this is a great deal right here. And again, if you don't need it for colored mana, you can always tap it for colorless. Last in this section is Rivaz of the Claw. This is 1 a black and a red for a 3/3 legendary lizard warlock with menace that says tap and add 2 mana in any combination of colors, but only to cast dragon creature spells. We have a few dragons in this deck. As you can see, 5 of them, including our commander. So Rivaz pays for 2 mana for our commander, which is pretty great. It also says, once during each of our turns, we may cast a dragon creature spell from our graveyard. This is even better, because if Smaug gets removed, we just let Smaug go to the graveyard, and if someone wants to eat it out of our graveyard with a Tormod's Crypt or a Scavenging Ooze or something like that, we can just put Smaug into the command zone from exile there. That's totally fine. But if not, we use Rivaz and all our other mana. We use Rivaz's ability during our turn to cast Smaug from our graveyard, and whenever we cast a dragon creature spell from our graveyard, it gains when it dies exile it, which is not a disadvantage. Because again, with our commander, if our commander dies and would go to exile or the graveyard, we can just move to the command zone. So we're not losing anything there, but we are getting to let it go to the graveyard rather than the command zone the first time and recast it from there, which means we're only having to cast it from the command zone if we've already reanimated it from the graveyard, not paying a command tax, and then it's died a second time, thereby getting exiled and going to the command zone, so we're only paying the commander tax once for each time our commander gets removed. And remember, in our deck, we have so much treasure generation, it's easy to recast our commander if it does get removed, and when it gets recast, it's re-entering, so we're getting more treasures from it that time, assuming any of our opponents have any treasures, or have any artifacts. And Rivaz makes 2 mana, which is the commander tax. So if we were able to cast Smaug without Rivaz in the first place, Rivaz is helping us get him back over and over and over. And that's all just with Smaug. What if we're using this for one of our other dragons, like our Decadent Dragon, or our Goldspan Dragon, you know? Even if it's just a second bite at the apple and it would get exiled, you know, the second time it dies, that's still pretty good for us because dragons are powerful. So yeah, there we go. And that covers our acceleration section. Let's go now to our interaction section, which as usual, I've just tagged as removal. We're starting with Lightning Bolt. We're running a red deck. It's primarily red, so we're running Lightning Bolt. It's so good. A single red for an instant that does 3 damage to any target. We can hit anything with this. We can hit people's faces with this. We might be able to kill an opponent with this. But Lightning Bolt, I just see people running red decks that are not running Lightning Bolt. And yeah, it doesn't go in every deck, but it might as well, because it's still a powerful effect for a small amount of mana at instant speed, and 3 damage still kills things in Commander. They don't even have to have taken damage before that, since creatures are getting more efficient and powerful lower on the mana curve. Yeah, run Lightning Bolt. Next is Dragon Spark Reactor from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. 1 and a red for an artifact that says when it or another artifact we control enters, we put a charge counter on it. Charge counters are just used to track, how many charge counters are on it. They don't have another meaning. And then for 4 and sack this artifact, it will deal damage equal to the number of charge counters on it to a player and that same amount of damage to a creature. So we get to divide up the damage, or not divide it up, but we get to do the damage twice. Once to a player, once to a creature. We're blowing up a creature, and we're burning its controller's face, or maybe a different opponent's face. Maybe we kill a creature that opponent A has, and opponent C is going to take the damage to their face, which might just kill them, because in this deck, with all of the artifacts we have entering, particularly our treasures, this is going to get huge very quickly, and become able to kill anything that isn't hexproof or shrouded or indestructible or whatever, in addition to probably a player. And since most of those artifacts we've got coming in are treasures, they're also giving us, if we need, the mana in order to activate Dragon Spark Reactor. This card is a rattlesnake. It waits for someone to make the wrong step, and then it pounces and does a huge amount of damage, and it does it to 2 different places. I love this card. It works great in this deck. Next we have Feed the Swarm. This is 1 and a black for a sorcery that destroys a creature or enchantment an opponent controls, and then we lose life equal to that permanent's mana value. I put Feed the Swarm in most of my black decks, simply because we need access to a way to destroy enchantments. Red doesn't do that. Black only does that with, I think, 3-ish cards, and Feed the Swarm was the original, and it's still my favorite one. Plus, with the Secrets of Strixhaven Mystical Archive printing, we get Grist. Grist is not the big monster, Grist is this little monster. Grist is the Hunger Tide, a planeswalker insect. Really cool in the lore. Anyway, I think this is a great card. It's worth putting in a black deck. Infernal Grasp is a little bit of a boring inclusion. I don't like to use these kind of Doom Blades in my decks as much as I can avoid them, simply because they're good and therefore universally useful and not so flavorful, but it is a good card. So 1 and a black for an instant that destroys a creature and costs us 2 life. It's that simple. 2 mana, kill something, instant speed, costs us 2 life, who cares? So yeah, a good card, worth putting in your deck. I tend, like I said, not to run them because I like to do things that are a little bit more flavorful or at least synergistic, but it's a good card, so here we go. Next, we've got Rakdos Charm. It's a black and a red for an instant that lets us either exile a player's graveyard, so we turn off a reanimate player's ability to reanimate their good stuff. We can blow up an artifact, solid for us, or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller. This is pretty cool. It's going to do damage to us, so we probably don't want that to happen after Rankle and Torbrand have done their damage in the same turn. But if we have an opponent who is down to like 20 life, but they've got 1,000,000 tokens, at instant speed, we can kill them as each of their token creatures does damage to its controller. Yeah, so Rakdos Charm is a great way to remove an artifact, remove the graveyard player's ability to do their stuff, or sometimes remove a player. Next up, we have Mayhem Devil. Love this card. This is 1, a black, and a red for a 3/3 Devil that says whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, this creature deals 1 damage to any target. Any target, so we can remove creatures, planeswalkers, I guess battles, but definitely also players with this. And it's whenever a player sacrifices a permanent. Doesn't matter what the reason for sacrificing it is, doesn't matter if it's a treasure getting cracked or a treasure being sacrificed to a creature's ability or to another spell like Deadly Dispute. It doesn't matter if we're doing it or not because it's a player. So giving treasures to our opponents encourages them to sacrifice those treasures for mana or just to deny us more treasures if we're doing it before we have Smaug come in. But when we do that, Mayhem Devil is going to trigger for everything they sacrifice, and we're going to get to do damage either to them or their stuff or to their fellow opponents. Mayhem Devil works on things that aren't just tokens as well. So when we crack a food or a clue or a treasure, yes, we're triggering the Mayhem Devil, and so is anyone else when they crack those things. But what if someone cracks a Fetch Land, or an Evolving Wilds, or a Burnished Heart? Anything along those lines, it's a permanent, it's getting sacrificed, and a player's doing it, so the Mayhem Devil gives us 1 damage. This can be so much damage, and so annoying, that the Mayhem Devil ends up being a little bit of a removal magnet. So that's 1 removal spell not being sent at our commander or one of our other more powerful or repeatable or wider pingers. So yeah, Mayhem Devil is doing good work for us all over the place. Plus it's a 3-mana 3/3, which is totally fine. Great. Next, we've seen the Rose Room Treasurer, not usually acting as removal, but if we have our 3rd creature enter, we can sure pump a bunch of mana into it and have it do that much damage to any target. Visions of Ruin makes every opponent sack an artifact. Rankle and Torbrand can make every player, including us, sack a creature, which of course could be Rankle and Torbrand, or could be our commander so that we can recast our commander. These are both good options. And finally, we have Demonic Junker. This is 6 and a black for a 4/3 vehicle that crews for 2, and has affinity for artifacts, so it costs 1 generic less for each artifact we control, which often means Demonic Junker is going to come in and only cost a single black if we have just 6 treasures. That counts for affinity. And it says when it enters, for each player, we blow up to 1 target creature that player controls, and if a creature we controlled was destroyed this way, we put 2 1/1 counters on the Junker. So this is a pretty sweet ability for us to essentially treat this like a sacrifice outlet for ourselves. We don't have to destroy something on anyone's playmat. It says up to 1 for each player. So we don't have to kill one of our own things, but if we do, we turn that thing we killed into 2 counters on the Junker, which may be worth it to us or may not, it's up to us. But otherwise, it's an edict effect, or not really an edict effect, it's a destroy a creature effect that hits every one of our opponents. So we get rid of the 3 scariest or biggest or most annoying things on our opponent's playmats, or across our opponent's playmats, 1 per. And then we're left behind with at least a 4/3 crew 2 vehicle, which is pretty good for us as well, because vehicles are artifacts. So this is going to give us an artifact fall trigger if we have one of those to ping our opponents. We can use this as sacrifice fodder if we need it to, since it's an artifact, or we can just crew it, and if we need to sack a creature, it's now a creature we can sacrifice, and we've already gotten most of its value out of it. Pretty good either way. And that covers our interaction section. I mentioned before that we're only running 1 Wrath, which you've already seen. It's blood money. Nothing more extra to say about that. Just a solid Wrath that makes us some treasures, even though it is a little expensive. Yeah. So that covers all of our support sections. We're going to go over our supplemental sections of our deck now, starting with our burn section. This is a big deal because it's the main way we win. We've seen some of these already, but we're going to see some more. Lightning Bolt can hit opponents. Burn specifically is different from removal in that removal is about permanence. Burn is about direct damage to our opponents. So yeah, Lightning Bolt can bolt any target, so it hits an opponent. Dragonspark Reactor will do damage to a creature, but will also burn an opponent or a player. I guess it doesn't have to be an opponent, it could be us, but yeah, it'll hit a player as well. Marionette Apprentice is next. This is 1 and a black for a 1/2 human artificer with Fabricate 1. Fabricate means when this enters, we either put a 1/1 counter on it, or we make a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. And in this deck, it just depends on what we feel like. It's nice to be able to have this be a 2-mana 2/3, so that 1/1 counter is good. I usually make the servo in this deck, so that not only do we have an additional artifact coming in for our artifact fall triggers, but we have another creature/artifact that we have as sacrifice fodder, or at the very least, we can use it as a chump blocker or something. And when it goes away, whether it's been sacrificed or it has been, it's blocked or something, then we're going to get any of our triggers that counts for artifacts or creatures leaving the battlefield. For example, whenever another creature or artifact we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses a life. So this is a Blood Artist type effect that hits all of our opponents every time we have creatures or artifacts go to the graveyard. And remember, when you crack a token, tokens do change zones. Cracking a treasure is putting it in the graveyard. It just ceases to exist as a state-based action once it hits that. The same is true of food and of clues, and any other artifacts that go to our graveyard that aren't tokens are just going to stay there. But the Marionette Apprentice is going to drain each opponent for 1 every time this happens. Now notably, for the reasons that I called out for Rankle and Torbrand earlier, this is losing life, not doing damage. So Rankle and Torbrand will not increase this. Still, pretty sweet to be able to hit every opponent for 2 mana anytime any artifacts that we control or creatures go to our graveyard. We got a lot of that kind of effect in this section. Rakdos Charm can do 1 damage to each opponent, or to each player for each creature that those players control, so that's pretty good. I mentioned Reckless Fireweaver earlier. We're actually running it. It's 1 and a red for a 1/3 human artificer that says whenever an artifact we control enters, it does 1 damage to each opponent. Great. Hits every opponent. This is damage, thanks to Rankle and Torbrand. And it's artifacts entering. We're going to have a lot of that with our treasures. So this can do an awful lot of damage in sort of a similar way to Marionette Apprentice doing damage. We've seen the Sackville Bagginses. It does damage to target opponent, or rather it makes target opponent lose 1 life when we sack a token. Agent of the Iron Throne is next. This is a background from the Commander Legends Battle for Baldur's Gate set. It's 2 and a black for a legendary enchantment background. Notably, it's legendary, so this is a historic spell for Glowin, if you want to think about that. That it doesn't have an ability itself. Well, it has an ability, but what its ability is just giving our commander an ability, which means this thing that I'm about to read, which is important for our deck, does not function if Smaug is not in play, because Agent of the Iron Throne doesn't have this ability. It just gives it to Smaug. What it says is, whenever an artifact or creature you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, each opponent loses 1 life. So that's just what Marionette Apprentice says. So yeah, pretty good. Bonus Marionette Apprentice effect as long as Smaug is in play. Ingenious Artillerist is next. Artillerist. It's Artillerist. There you go. This is 2 and a red for a 3/1 human artificer that says whenever 1 or more artifacts we control enter, this deals that much damage to each opponent. So it's another impact trimmers effect that works on just artifacts, the same way that our Reckless Fireweaver does. It's just worded a little bit differently. Mayhem Devil does 1 damage to any target whenever anyone sacrifices anything. That's pretty good. Nadier's Nightblade is 2 and a black for a 1/3 elf warrior that says whenever a token we control leaves the battlefield, each opponent loses a life and we gain a life. So that's only tokens, not permanents or artifacts or creatures. It's only things that were tokens, but an awful lot of our deck is tokens. Even if it's just those treasures, that's pretty great, because this isn't like our Marionette Apprentice, having each opponent lose a life, which again isn't damage, it's just loss of life. It's also us gaining life. So only works on tokens, but it gains us life as well, which is pretty good, especially if we're losing life to our Smaug triggers whenever we cast a spell using treasure mana. Next up is Pain Distributor. This is a cool card from the March of the Machine commander decks, set on New Capenna clearly. This is 2 and a red for a 2/3 Devil Citizen with Menace that says whenever a player casts their first spell each turn, they make a treasure. So that counts us, but also our opponents. So this is 1 more of our cards that gives our opponents treasures, which helps them, but also helps us, because we cast Smaug, and if they don't want to crack those treasures for basically no value, then we're going to get more tapped treasures from Smaug's Enters trigger. And Pain Distributor helps us in other ways, because whenever an artifact an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, this creature deals 1 damage to that player. So that includes the treasures that they're being given every time they cast their first spell each turn. So this is a solid evasive attacker for only 3 mana that also gives us treasures, gives our opponents treasures, but also damage. It doesn't hurt us because it only cares about artifacts going to our opponents' graveyards. So yeah, pretty good. And it doesn't just count token artifacts like treasures. If they crack what was the example I used earlier? A Burnished Heart? That's pretty good. If they have a Sad Robot, a Solemn Simulacrum that just dies, that's going to go to the graveyard, so it's going to trigger here as well. This can be pretty nice for us. Distributing Pain. Next we have my very favorite Impact Tremors effect of recent years. This is from Edge of Eternities. It's Weftstalker Ardent, a 2/3 Drix Artificer for 2 and a red that says whenever another creature or artifact you control enters, this deals 1 damage to each opponent. So it works on creatures coming in, it works on artifacts coming in. We've got a lot of creatures, we've got a lot of artifacts, we've got a lot of artifact tokens. Weftstalker Ardent burns each opponent for 1 every time any of that happens, as long as it's not the Ardent itself. And this is damage, so it will be increased by Rankle and Torbrand's sabotage trigger. So yeah, having this in play and getting a bunch of stuff to come in and turning those into lightning bolts with Rankle and Torbrand, pretty great. But Webstalker Ardent can sneak in briefly with its warp ability. Warp is an alternate casting cost. For a single red, if we warp it in, it enters the battlefield normally, and then it will still get these triggers for any other creatures or artifacts that enter during that turn. And then at the end of turn, we have a delayed trigger that exiles this. And similar to what happens with an adventure, we can cast Webstalker Ardent for its full price from exile. We have to do it on a later turn, which is different from the way that adventures work, but it gives us the ability to spend only a single mana and then have it come in and do its thing for a turn and get a little preview of it before it then goes to exile and we have to cast it for 3. But like I was mentioning earlier with adventures, the fact that we can warp this in and then play it from exile means we get 2 bites at the apple in terms of spending our treasure to draw cards from our commander. So we spend 1 treasure to cast it for its warp cost, and Smaug is going to cause us to lose a life and draw a card. Webstalker Ardent comes in, we can have any other creatures or artifacts enter during that turn, get all of our triggers from it, then it goes to exile, and on a later turn, we cast it for 2 in a red, and as long as we spend mana from treasure on that, we're going to get to draw another card from Smaug. So again, double dipping on those Smaug triggers the same way we would with our adventure cards, something we can do with Webstalker Ardent thanks to Warp. Pretty good for us. Next up, we have one from the original Lord of the Rings set. It's Mirkwood Bats. This is 3 and a black for a 2/3 flying bat. I know it's bats, but it's just 1 bat, I guess. Anyway, it also says whenever we create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses a life. So this is interesting. It's not actually artifact fall. It's just any token at all, whether it's an artifact or not. When we make it, each opponent loses a life. When we sack it, each opponent loses a life. So it's also not tokens going to the graveyard, it's specifically them being sacked. So if an opponent, I don't know, sees that we've got a bunch of food tokens and destroys them, that won't trigger Mirkwood Bats because they weren't sacrificed, the tokens that is. So yeah, Mirkwood Bats is a kind of a weird card, but it's solid in our deck, and it isn't damage, it's loss of life, but it's each opponent, so that's pretty good. Next is Pact Doll Terror. This is from Duskmourn. This is from Aetherdrift. The plane it's from is Duskmourn. This is 3 and a black for a 3/4 artifact creature, toy. So this is an artifact as well for all those artifact fall triggers like Reckless Fireweaver. It says whenever this creature or another artifact you control enters, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So another drain, so we're not doing damage with this life loss, but we are gaining life, and it triggers off of itself and any other artifacts we have coming in. So something else that isn't helped by Rankle and Torbrand, but does gain us life, triggers off of itself. It's a fine body for a 4-drop. Yeah, this is a pretty solid inclusion. We've seen Rose Room Treasurer, makes us treasures whenever we have creatures enter, but can also, if we have creature, the 3rd or later creature enter, we can turn a bunch of our mana into a bunch of damage, which can go at any target. Rankle and Torbrand doesn't actually burn anyone, but does increase a lot of our burn, so that's why I put them in this section, just to remind us. And then we saw the Marionette Apprentice. Here is the original version of it, which is Marionette Master. This is 4 and double black for a 1/3 human artificer with Fabricate 3, so it could come in and make 3 little servos, or it could come in and get 3 counters on it, making it a 4/6. Which is usually what we want to do because it says whenever an artifact we control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, so this is only artifacts, not creatures as well, target opponent loses life equal to this creature's power. This is also target opponent rather than each opponent. So the Apprentice is pretty good. The Master is also good because if we put 4 counters on this, then every time we crack a treasure, one of our opponents is going to lose 4 life. That's pretty good. We do that with, 5 treasures. That's immediately 20 life loss. It's not hard for us to just kill an opponent with that, which means Marionette Master is often a little bit of a removal magnet, and that's good for us too. We get to keep our commander if the removal spells are being sent at the Marionette Master rather than Smaug. So yeah, so that covers our burn section. Let's go now to our payoff section. These are all cards that reward us for doing what we were going to do anyway, beyond just the artifacts, entering or leaving that we saw from our burn section. So we've seen Bucknard's Everfull Purse. This gives us the ability to put more artifacts on our opponent's playmats, not just in the form of the treasures it makes, but also the purse itself. Marching Duodrone does the same. It lets us put treasures on our opponent's playmats as well as our own whenever it attacks. Ranklin Torbran lets us do the same with treasures. Pretty helpful for us, in addition to giving us even more damage with our with its third mode here, whenever we do our damage to players. We've seen Academy Manufacturer as well, because we're going to be making a lot of treasures, so we might as well get some clues and foods in the same game action with this replacement effect. The only card we haven't seen in this section is Conjurer's Closet, which is a little bit of a weird inclusion in this deck, but there's a reason for it. For 5 generic mana, this is an artifact that says at the beginning of our end step, we may exile a creature we control, then return it to the battlefield under our control. This is just flickering. It's great. It gives us the ability to say, at the very least in our deck, we attacked with Smaug. Well, now Smaug is a 5/5 flyer, but it's tapped, so it can't block. So at the end step, we're going to flicker Smaug. Smaug will leave and re-enter, not just becoming an untapped 5/5, but getting its enters trigger again. So all of those treasures, or all of those other artifacts that are on our opponent's playmats, we're going to get our commander's enters trigger every turn at our end step when we flicker Smaug. So Conjurer's Closet is in this deck only for that reason, but we can use it for a lot of other reasons as well. If we wanted to, for example, have our Marionette Master come in and use its Fabricate 3 trigger to make 3 little servos, then we flicker it and it comes back in, and we use its Fabricate trigger to put counters on itself. Now we've gotten best of both worlds. These are just examples, obviously, but any enters triggers, any other kinds of situations we want to do with flickering our creatures, even if it's just flickering something and being able to untap with it. It's also notable that this says, return that card to the battlefield under your control. There's a lot of flicker effects that specifically bring something back into play under the card's owner's control, but Conjurer's Closet is not that. So if we have on several of our abilities, like our Decadent Dragon's Adventure, if we've stolen things from our opponents, we can also flicker them to get more value out of them, or just untap them if it's maybe like a big Galta or something that we want to have as a blocker and an attacker. We flicker it with Conjurer's Closet, it doesn't return to the battlefield under its owner's control, it's still under ours. So yeah, Conjurer's Closet is great in this deck, even if all we're doing with it is making more and more tapped treasure tokens every turn with our commander. So yeah, there you go. That covers our payoff section. Next, let's talk about Pump. These are all ways to make our things bigger, and we've seen several of these. Gold Vein Pick and Diamond Pickaxe are both kind of the same thing, a little similar, or a little different, but they both add +1/+1 to the equipped creature and let us make some treasures when those things attack or do damage. Kalane comes in with the treasure, but lets our creatures come in with a number of 1/1 counters on them equal to the amount of treasure we spent, mana from treasure we spent to cast those creatures. Coin of Mastery does the same thing for us. Shiny Impetus can go on one of our creatures, giving it +2/+2. And we have Cranial Plating and Cranial Ram, which is sort of an updated Cranial Plating. Let's talk about these. Original Cranial Plating is a 2 generic mana equipment that equips for 1, and says equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control. That includes the plating itself, so at the very least, this is 2 mana for a 1 equipment that gives +1/+0. But if we've got 7 treasures, then it's giving +8/+0, 1 for each treasure and 1 for the plating itself. So this can be a great way to pump up, at the very least, our flying commander into a huge, enormous, I mean, that's the same thing, but it's Smaug, so yeah, a big creature that does a lot of damage that gets higher the more wealthy we get. And Cranial Plating is even better because once it's in play, we can use this as a combat trick. Because it doesn't just say equip for 1, it says pay double black and attach this equipment to target creature you control. Equipping is automatically at sorcery speed, but this ability is not. So we can have Cranial Plating just sitting on the battlefield. We cast it 1 turn, and it's a couple of turns later, we attack with our commander, and an opponent goes, hey, you haven't attacked me yet, I don't mind just taking 5 from you. We say, okay. After blocks are declared, since you declared no blocks on our commander, we activate this ability on Cranial Plating, attach it to our commander, and now our commander is getting, let's pretend, +16/+0. Now our commander is a 21/5 that's unblocked, and if they don't have any removal, they lose the game to commander damage. So Cranial Plating is very powerful for us, especially in this deck with our flying commander and all of this treasure we're making. We also have Cranial Ram. This is a black and a red for an equipment that equips for 2, but has Living Weapon. Living Weapon means when it enters, we make a 0/0 black Phyrexian Germ creature token and attach Cranial Ram to it. And then the equipped creature gets +X+1, where X is the number of artifacts we control. So kind of similar to original Cranial Plating, but it gives a bonus to toughness as well, so that the germ it goes on doesn't die. It becomes an X1, where X is the number of artifacts we control, which will be at least 1, thanks to the ram being an artifact. So this is not quite as powerful as Cranial Plating for us, since we can't instantly attach it to our commander, but it's pretty nice, and it comes with a free token, so it's almost like this is a creature spell, since it'll make an X1 for us that we can either attack with or block with. We can sacrifice the germ, or just let the germ die by re-equipping Cranial Ram to something like our commander. Pretty good for us no matter what we do with it. And that covers our pump section. Let's go now to our protection section. This is several cards that we've seen already. Glowin we've seen because it can goad things, that protects us from a creature. Shiny Impetus also can goad something, but permanently, as long as Shiny Impetus and that creature are on the battlefield. My Precious can give Hexproof to the equipped creature, and so, like I mentioned before, can the Swifties. Swiftfoot Boots is too generic for an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature Hexproof and Haste. Haste can be relevant in this deck since we do have some attack triggers, but usually we're putting this on Smaug to keep Smaug alive. If we want Smaug to die, there are ways for us to make that happen so that we can recast Smaug, but most of the time we just want him to be safe, so Swiftfoot Boots is a way for us to do that. Pretty good. That covers our protection section. Next we have our outlets. These are all ways that I've just cataloged to point out here are things we can use to sacrifice our stuff. Deadly Dispute lets us sack an artifact or creature when we cast it, or requires us to. Sackville Baggins lets us also sacrifice a creature or artifact when it enters. My Precious has the Allure of Power instant adventure that requires us to sack a creature. Skullport Merchant we can use to sack treasures or creatures. And Rankle and Torbrand lets everyone sack a creature, which includes us if we need to, as one of its options. So yeah, just ways if we need to have an outlet for something that we have them. We next have our Recursion section. This is just a couple of cards that we're able to get things back from the graveyard, whether it's the card itself or something else. Visions of Ruin has Flashback, so we can cast it a second time. And Rivas lets us cast our dragon spells from the graveyard, which includes our commander, and that's pretty great, being able to get our commander back over and over and either delay or eventually cheat on the commander attacks. Pretty good. Our last section is just a collection of the cards that make tokens. I just wanted to call it out. Cranial Ram makes a germ, which again will just die if we re-equip the Cranial Ram, but we can use that as sacrifice fodder to one of those outlets if we need to. Idol of Oblivion can be cracked to make a 10/10 Eldrazi, and Marionette Apprentice and Marionette Master both have Fabricate to make us servos if we want them to. I usually like the Apprentice to make a servo and the Master to just put counters on itself. But yeah, you do it however you like. And that covers all of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base now, starting with our basics. We are running 22 different basics, 13 mountains, 9 swamps. That's pretty good for the proportions of colors in our deck. You could actually even go heavier into the red and lower into the black, but I wanted to stick to this because I like to fudge things a little bit closer toward being balanced, simply because early in the game, if we have some cheap spells that are our minority color, we want to be able to cast them. And we're not usually looking for a whole lot of red mana, even though we have a few cards like Hit the Motherlode, which has triple red in its cost, but we've got a lot of time to get to 7 mana and therefore triple red with that. So yeah, this is our good balance. And obviously we're using the beautiful Hobbit lands with the songs on them. So yeah. Next is Canyon Slough. This is a bicycle land. It is a swamp and a mountain, and it enters tapped. So since it has those inherent basic types, it inherently taps for black or red. And so it's a tap land. Just a tapped dual, makes both of our colors. That's pretty good. It also has cycling for 2, meaning we can pay 2 generic and discard it from our hand to draw a card. Similar to what I was talking about with the Mind Stone, this is something we do if it's late game and we just don't need more lands. We can draw another card by discarding this from our hand. Or if it's early game and we're just desperate for card draw somehow, and we just think that we'd rather have more cards than more land, because maybe we're flooded or something, this is a good option for us either way. But why is it relevant that it has both basic types? Well, because we've got a check land. This is a Dragonskull Summit. a land that taps for black or red and enters tapped unless we control a swamp or a mountain. Now, as you've seen, we have 22 swamps and mountains, but we have a 23rd one right here in Canyon Slough because it is also a swamp and a mountain. If this is in play and we have no other lands in play, we can play Dragon Skull Summit and it comes in untapped. That's pretty great for us. We also have a Tango land, which you'll see in a moment, and another reason why this is relevant with these kind of check land style effects. But yeah, that's why we've got these dual type lands. If you were to want to upgrade Canyon Slough, I think a good upgrade would be Blood Crypt, the shock land. Obviously, shock lands are always in demand and therefore always a little pricier than, 15 cents. But yeah, that's a good option for this. If you want to upgrade Dragon Skull Summit, I would say Haunted Ridge, the slow land, is a pretty good option. I think right now it's going for about $8 US. But it's pretty likely, I believe it's likely at least, that Reality Fracture, which at time of recording is the next standard set coming out, is going to contain reprints of the Allied Color slow lands. Because recently we had Secrets of Strixhaven come out and reprint the enemy colored slow lands. So probably the price will go down on Haunted Ridge, and if it does, I say just cut a mountain and add that as well, because check lands are always good, especially in a deck that's running at least 18 sources of those basic types. So yeah. Next up, we've got Shadowblood Ridge. This is a filter land. It is a land with exactly the same text on it as our Rakdos Signet. Pay 1, tap it, it adds both of our colors. So it gives us our colors, filters our mana, pretty solid. Next, we've got these 4 fixing lands. Obviously, we're running Command Tower. It's a land that comes in untapped and has tap, add 1 mana of any color in your commander's color identity. So again, in this deck, red or black, it's the same text as Arcane Signet, and it's an untapped dual land. We would run this if it was a tap land. Because we are. It's Path of Ancestry. This is a land that enters tapped and has the same text as Command Tower, but it also says when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a creature type with our commander, we scry one. Our commander is a dragon, and as you saw earlier, there are 5 dragons in the deck, including our commander. So every time we cast our commander with Path of Ancestry's mana, we're going to get a scry, or any of those other dragons, even if we're casting them from the graveyard using Rivas. Pretty good. Next, we've got Myriad Landscape. This is a tap land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for 2 basic land cards that share a land type. So that is 2 basic mountains or 2 basic swamps in this deck. Then put those on the battlefield, tapped, and shuffle. So even though this comes in tapped, the lands that it finds come in tapped, and we have to pay mana and tap and sack it in order to go fetch those lands, it is 1 land drop that's turning into 2 color-producing lands in play. So it's slow acceleration, if you want to think of it that way. So worth running in a deck like this for these colors. Similarly, we've got Temple of the False God. It's no one's favorite land, but it's an untapped land that taps for 2 colorless mana, like Sol Ring. It's a soul land. We just can't activate it at all unless we control at least 4 other lands. So that is 5 or more, including itself. So even though Temple of the False God doesn't accelerate us early on, and if our opening hand is something like a swamp and Temple of the False God and no other mana sources, we probably want to mulligan that. This does give us a little acceleration mid-game. It does let us jump, if this is our 5th land, from making 4 mana to making 6, and 2 mana pays for our commander tax. Our commander is a 5 mana commander, so casting it or recasting it, Temple of the False God can really help us with. This is perfect for the power level of decks that I build for this channel, and so for this deck. Next up, we have Sulphurous Springs, a great pain land. It's an untapped land, adds tap to add colorless or tap to add a black or red if we wanted to do a damage to us. So this is identical to the Talisman we saw earlier, but in our land base. Everything I said about the Talisman is just as true here. It's worth running. It's basically an untapped duel. Yeah. Next, we have Foreboding Ruins, a reveal land. It taps for black or red, and as it enters, we can reveal a swamp or mountain card from our hand, and if we don't, it comes in tapped. But if we do, it comes in as an untapped duel. So this is similar to our Dragon Skull Summit, our check land, in that it wants us to have more swamps and mountains in our deck, which includes the dual lands that I mentioned, the Bicycle and the Tango lands. So this is a good card to have. It's not quite as good as our check land, but it's a solid possibility because worst case, its floor is just a tap land that makes both of our colors, and that's totally fine. If you were to want to upgrade this, I would say that Blazemire Verge is what I would go with. I like to say that the Verge lands from Duskmourn and Aetherdrift are good upgrades for the reveal lands. Much more expensive because they're played in standard right now. But yeah, pretty good upgrade. But if you want this is a solid budget inclusion, so I think these are fine. Next we have Temple of Malice. It's one of the temples. It's a tap land, makes both of our colors, scries 1 when it enters. Hard to say no to this. It's perennially reprinted, currently in Foundations, and so it's in standard basically forever now. And yeah, these are just solid tap lands that give us a little extra value. If you want to upgrade it, Raucous Theater is the Surveil land version of this. Surveil is a little bit better than Scry, and it has the dual types of Mountain and Swamp, if you want to go with that. Again, Surveil lands are played in every format they're legal in, so much more expensive, but yeah, good upgrade. Now we have that Tangle land I mentioned. It's Smoldering Marsh. It is a swamp and a mountain, just like our Bicycle land, that says it comes in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So as long as we have a basic swamp and a basic mountain in play, or 1 or 2 of each, this will come in as an untapped dual that also counts as a swamp and a mountain. And if it comes in tapped, that's okay. It's a tap land that makes both of our colors. Again, that's a fine floor for our land base. But because we have so many basics, we've got 22 cards in our deck that are basic lands, which is to say 2/9 of our deck, essentially, is basic lands. Smoldering Marsh is likely to come in as an untapped dual, and that seems good. Our last section here are our utility lands. These are cards that help us in ways that are beyond just making mana for us. Demolition Field is first. This is a land that taps for colorless mana, or if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we can destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls, and then that land's controller gets to search their library for a basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped, and then shuffle. And we get to do the same, find ourselves our own basic land and put it on the battlefield untapped. So we are replacing the demo field with a basic, and the controller of the non-basic we blew up is replacing that non-basic with a basic of their own, as long as, of course, both players aren't out of basics in their library. So this is a one-of land destruction effect that's appropriate even for groups of players that don't want to see lands get destroyed, since this doesn't put someone down mana, as long as we didn't hit something like a bounce land or a land that's enchanted with wild growth or something along those lines. This is just a way for us to deal with problematic non-basics that might be stopping us from doing what we need to do, or really helping an opponent achieve their goal, their game plan, before we're able to do ours. So yeah, having a single answer is not so bad. Next we have Fountain Port, a card that I really like from Bloomborough. This is a land that comes in untapped, taps for colorless. We can pay 2, tap, and sack a token of any sort, creature or otherwise, could be one of our treasures, to draw a card. We can pay 2 and tap it and pay a life to make a 1/1 blue fish creature token, which is a token we can sacrifice to make a card next turn. Or if we've just got mana sitting around, we can pay 4 and tap the Fountain Port to make a treasure and just get more treasures for us. So this gives us extra treasures. It lets us turn our treasures or other tokens into cards. It even gives us chump blockers or just fish that we can use for other reasons. Maybe we want to cast something that requires us to sack a creature, and we don't want to sacrifice any of our creatures that we already have in play, but we do have enough mana to use the Fountain Port to make that fish, and then cast that spell that requires us to sack a creature and sack the fish to it. All of that works pretty well. Next we have Midgar, City of Mako from the Final Fantasy set. This is a tapped land that makes black mana, but it also has an adventure on it. Reactor Raid, a sorcery for 2 and a black that has us sacrifice an artifact or creature to draw 2 cards, and then this will go to exile and we can play it as a land from exile whenever we're able to make our land drop for the turn. So yeah, a nice way for us to have a little bit of extra bonus adventure, use this as another outlet to draw a little bit more in the way of cards, and get our minority color more represented in our deck. Last is Rogue's Passage. This is a land that comes in tapped, taps for colorless, or if we pay 4 and tap it, target creature can't be blocked this turn. So there's 3 things we can do with this. One is we use it on our commander or any of our other creatures and just protect them from being blocked, guaranteeing the damage as long as they're not removed. I say protect in the sense that they're not going to be blocked and thereby maybe killed from that block. That's pretty great, especially if what we're trying to do is win with damage, or at least supplement all of the burn damage we're doing by attacking with our 5/5 flying commander. Usually flying is enough, but Rogue's Passage making it unblockable is pretty good too. The second way we can use this is politically, because it doesn't say target creature you control can't be blocked. So we can target our opponent's creatures with this. We can say, hey look, I'll make a deal with you, opponent A. You attack opponent B with your huge commander, I will use my Rogue's Passage to make the commander unblockable, as long as you leave me alone for a turn cycle or two. And opponent A is probably going to say, yeah, sure, I agree to that, go ahead and activate your Rogue's Passage. And we will say, no, you have to attack first, because if we use the Rogue's Passage before you declare that creature as an attacker, you could declare them at us, and we wouldn't be able to block. So we want to make this deal, but, I'm the one offering the deal, you've got to give me a show of faith. And they'll say, that's fair, we want to be a good, and honest player. I will declare an attack against opponent B with this huge commander. And of course, opponent B is like, what the heck, guys? Why are you ganging up on me? But we ignore them, and we say, in response to you declaring that attack, during your declare attacker's step, we will activate Rogue's Passage and make your creature unblockable. And all of that is great for us, because not only have we set ourselves up at the table as someone who's willing to work with other people, and we've made a friend and maybe protected ourselves from that friend for a turn cycle or two, but we've also used opponent A's turn, their combat phase, to advance our game plan, because opponent B is our opponent too. So opponent A doing damage to them helps us. It also makes it so that unless the creature that we use Rogue's Passage on is vigilant, that creature's now tapped down. So we could attack opponent A next turn and they wouldn't be able to block with that creature. But at the very least, we've gotten opponent A to make an attack that they might not have made, which commits them not only to earning the enmity of opponent B, but also to using their resources, their creature, and their attack phase, or their combat phase, to doing damage. And in a way, it's on our behalf. So Rogue's Passage gives us a lot of value in the form of sort of soft power, in addition to just doing damage with someone else's creature to a different opponent we like, or that we want to have damage dealt to. And yeah, the third way you can use Rogue's Passage, I like to say, is strategically. It's exactly the same as what I just said, but you don't make a deal. You wait for opponent A to attack opponent B, and then before blocks are declared, you say, hang on, I'm going to activate Rogue's Passage and make your big creature unblockable. Because that, again, helps us out by doing damage to opponent B. But it doesn't set us up to gain anything from a deal, and doesn't set us up to make for opponent A to feel like we've betrayed them if we attack them afterwards. It just helps our game plan, and all we have to do is spend a little mana in order to do a lot more damage to an opponent without spending any of our other resources. None of our sources of damage are doing it. All we're doing is spending mana to do guaranteed damage to that opponent, or to force that opponent to use a removal spell on a creature that we don't control. So it's helpful either way. In addition, as I often mention, this kind of action at the table, I don't see it happen a lot in a lot of the pods that I've played in. If two opponents are engaged in combat, or two players are engaged in combat, you don't usually see one of the other players insert themselves into that combat somehow, which means it's a little bit more memorable, and that makes it more fun and gives you a little bit of a splashy moment in the game that can really turn the tide for things, but also just feels good. So yeah, Rogue's Passage, I put it in a lot of my decks because it's a low cost of inclusion for a land that comes in untapped and does tap for mana, and can really just, even if you only use it once during a game to make something unblockable, and even if that thing is only one of your things, sometimes that can win you the game, and it's just a valuable card. It helps out a lot. So yeah, I like that. And that sums it up. Again, I'm releasing new Hobbit Commander decks every Thursday until October when Reality Fracture drops, so let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific Hobbit Commander or deck style. Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. If you want to support what I do here, make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Consider joining this channel on YouTube, or joining my Patreon at patreon.com/secondmonitormagic. And remember, most of all, that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.